welcome, and thank you for joining us on increasing inclusion in all STEAM learning environments. My name is Ed Honowitz. I'm hosting this session. During the session, you're encouraged to ask questions and share comments in the chat. Everyone has access to the chat today, and I'll be moderating the chat along with our presenter, Jennifer Bentley, rather. And you'll see the link to the session presentation on the top of the chat right now. It's pinned there. Feel free to follow along if you want to open that in a separate window. It's the slide deck. As far as sharing your video or audio, we have a few special instructions. Our virtual platform allows for a limited number of people to share their video and audio simultaneously. That's limited to 9 people. There's a blue button on your screen. You can click on that if you want to be added to the queue to ask a clarifying question or to share your screen. Likewise, you can also just put questions in the chat. And then lastly, you'll automatically start in gallery view, and you can control your display. If you'd like one of the tiles to be larger, simply double click on it. And now I'm excited to introduce you to Jennifer Bentley, who will be the presenter for the session. Welcome.
Hi, Jennifer. Thank you, Ed. So this is the why, what, and how increasing inclusion in the STEAM classroom. I see Kathleen requested permission. Do you have a question, Kathleen?
No.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to get us started here. So to tell you a little bit about myself. So my name is Jennifer Bentley. I work at the California Department of Education. I am in the Curriculum Frameworks and Instructional Resources Division. I'm mainly over the science and health content, but we all work with all kinds of different content areas, and including things like instructional supports, which is what our presentation is going to be about today. So just to start us off, I want to do a little poll. So I'm putting the link directly into the chat, but the information for how to join is also in the slide right now. So if you could just take a second to take the poll just to get a quick, just one question to get a quick temperature of the room. Okay, I see nervous is a big one up there, anxious, but also good. People are excited to get back to school. A little unsure, maybe. I see risky. So as we move through this new distance learning normal that we're in, or even the teachers that are teaching face-to-face, one of the things that's huge for inclusion is starting off with letting students express their feelings, and letting students let you know how they are feeling before, during, even after instruction. And we're going to talk a lot about universal design for learning, and one of the principles of universal design for learning is around this idea of self-regulation. And if we know how our audience is feeling by asking a poll question, or having students write to you, or however you're able to do it through your distance learning or through face-to-face instruction, you're able to allow them to practice that self-regulation and to tailor your instruction around knowing how your students are feeling. So this is just a quick example of that. It also lets the rest of the class or the rest of your audience see how everybody else is feeling, maybe to diminish that sort of anxiety in themselves or that affective filter. I mean, clearly we're all anxious and apprehensive about how the new school year is going to go. I'm not even in the classroom and I feel anxious for teachers and for students and parents. But it's also nice to know that some people are really excited and hopeful, and it's not all negative or anxiety driven. And again, if you have any questions or anything, put in the chat or ask to speak, and I'll be happy to have you share. Okay. So just to get us started here, this is what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the why. So why are we worried about inclusion? We want to make sure that all of our students have access to the curriculum. All of our students can benefit from STEAM instruction. We'll go over the what to help us make sure students are accessing the curriculum. We're going to go over what universal design for learning is. And then if there's time, we'll discuss how we can go through some opportunities for implementation. Just a heads up, this was a 90-minute presentation that I usually give, that we're condensing into 30 minutes. So there's a lot more about implementation, that if you need information on that, my contact information will be at the end of the presentation, and you are more than welcome to contact me for some of those suggestions on implementation. So just talking about our why really quick. So this, hopefully you recognize this. This is the dashboard that California Department of Education puts out. Our most recent data is from 2018. So this information is a little bit dated, but I just kind of want you to take a second and take in the colors and the information, and then I'm going to call on, hopefully somebody will want to share what their impressions of this dashboard information are. So just take 30 seconds to kind of look at it. And like Ed said, if you need it to be larger, you can double click on the picture. Think about where the largest need is for our students, and what student groups have the largest need. And as you start to think about that, you can add in chat what you're thinking, or you can ask to ask a question. So where's our largest need? What does the red subgroup box mean? Which students clearly need the most instructional support from our teachers and from our administrators? Go ahead and type it into the chat box. Okay, I see foster youth. Yeah, definitely. So we have our foster youth. They're red in suspension rates, graduation rates, English, ELA, and math scores. Students with disabilities, definitely. So we are seeing our students with disabilities missing the mark in college and career readiness, in ELA and math scores, definitely. And both of these subgroups are red, but we also see a lot of oranges in our socioeconomically disadvantaged groups. We see a lot of oranges in our English learners. So there's all of these groups need these instructional supports that we're going to talk about. Universal design for learning is not just for students with disabilities. It's for all of our students. Nicole, does that include DHH? I'm not sure what your question is asking. Deaf and hard of hearing, yes. They're a part of the students with disabilities subgroup, and I'll have a more disaggregated group of data so you can see what percentages of those students are within that students with disabilities category. But yes, deaf and hard of hearing students are included in that red dashboard box.
And then I think there's also kind of like the cross-cutting pieces when you have students with disabilities who are also English learners living in poverty, et cetera. So compounded issues.
Yeah, we're going to talk about how the LCFF groups definitely commingle, and students don't just stay in one little box. So why is this important? Why is this a timely, other than because it's important for our students to learn, we also want to think about the MTSS, multi-tiered system of supports, and this framework around aligning academic, behavioral, and social and emotional learning for the entire state. So this MTSS structure that California Department of Education has provided offers this structure needed for instructional design and redesigning of all those services and supports that we need in order to quickly identify those students that need the extra help. We also want to think about MTSS as a distance learner, universal support for all students. So there's 3 tiers. That first tier of students is everybody. So we want to make sure we're giving best first instruction for all students. And one of the ways to do that is through universal design for learning. What might help one student can also help another student regardless of LCFF groups. And also with something that we're all kind of struggling with or trying to incorporate into our curriculum is this distance learning. So we know that students with disabilities, but also all students, need more inclusion supports during this time of distance learning. So we have to think about, as we develop our distance learning curriculum, where are the opportunities for inclusion supports for all students through UDL or other inclusion techniques. Just in case you weren't aware, the California Science Framework has a lot of opportunities for inclusion. I just want to hit a couple that as you're redesigning your curriculum for distance learning or for hybrid instruction, these might be one of the places, the framework might be some of the places you want to look. This is all in chapter 10 of the framework. So there are a lot of suggestions and guidance in the framework around modifications versus accommodations. So thinking about, do your students need a modified curriculum, or can they just be supported with accommodations through your curriculum? We already kind of talked about the multi-tiered system of supports and that coordinated framework for all students. Inside chapter 10 of the framework, you'll also find guidance on culturally and linguistic teaching, thinking about those equity-focused approaches, which may be even more needed for our students right now during this time of COVID-19 and distance learning. Using their background and heritage in infusing that into your curriculum. And then lastly, the one we'll be talking about mostly today, universal design for learning, and this research-based framework that will guide your educational practices. So all of these things are in chapter 10 of the framework, and I would really suggest that if you have not read this chapter even recently or at all, that you go and check out this chapter 10 in the framework, which you can find on the California Department of Education's website. There's a lot of research-based guidance around how to best support your students and get that inclusion into your curriculum and your classroom. So really quickly, who are our students with disabilities? I just want us to think about that we can't always look at our students and identify who has those disabilities. The majority of our students have these invisible disabilities. This thinking about something that you can't see unless you have their IEP in front of you. You can't walk into the room necessarily and be able to pick out which students in your classroom are the ones that have disabilities or that need extra assistance, especially thinking about distance learning and trying to navigate who has the disability and who doesn't via Zoom or whatever platform you're using. That can be a little bit difficult, even more difficult than it is when you're in the classroom. So as we plan our instruction, we want to think about we can't always see which students need that extra support just by looking at them, and making sure that we are providing enough supports in our classroom for all students, so we're catching anyone who might need that extra support. I want to talk about how many students really need this inclusion support in our classrooms here in the state of California. Does anyone recognize what this is a picture of? You could just put it in the chat box if you do. Give you a second to look at it. Yes, this is. It's the Hollywood Bowl. Awesome. I moved to Sacramento about 3 or 4 years ago. Before that, I lived in Los Angeles, and the Hollywood Bowl is an awesome venue. If you haven't had a chance to see a concert there or a show there, I would highly suggest it. But it's really big. It's this huge outside venue with the stage kind of at the front, and it's in the same park as the Griffith Observatory. It's really cool. Just as a visual, I kind of want you to think about the fact that there are 795,047 students in the state of California, and this was 2018 data, so it's quite possible there's much more now, that are classified as having a disability. So if you think about the Hollywood Bowl, that means that we could fill up the Hollywood Bowl 44 times with the students in the state of California who are classified as having a disability. So that's a lot of students and a lot of people. The Hollywood Bowl can hold 17,500 people. So I just want us to think about there's a lot of kids that need our support throughout the state. So I told you I would show some disaggregated data about what student disabilities we have. So that specific learning disability, that sort of students who are classified with that invisible disability, they are the majority of our students that are in special education. That 37.8% of students who are classified as having that invisible disability. And the next largest group is our speech or language impairment, and then followed by our autistic students and other health impairments. So as Ed mentioned, I also want teachers and administrators to think about the fact that students who may be within the, let's say for instance in the autism group, that disabilities are on a spectrum. So they might need the autistic student might need a mild support, whereas a student in the specific learning disability might need quite a significant support that's different from the autism group. So we want to make sure that we're thinking about these disabilities are on a spectrum, and some supports in one area might need to be stronger than other supports. So just to give us, here's our Hollywood Bowl visual again. So out of all of those students that I talked about, that almost 800,000 group, 71% of them fit into more than one of those LCFF groups that I showed you in that dashboard. So a student that is in the special education group or students with disabilities group might also be in the foster youth group, might also be in the socioeconomically disadvantaged group. So if we're thinking about 71% of those students classified as students with disability, they would fill the Hollywood Bowl 31.5 of the 44 times. So UDL, which we're going to talk about here in a second, helps us fit all of those supports that students need, even if students hit more one LCFF group. So I'm going to show you a video really quick. It's from the CAST website, which is sort of the creators of the Universal Design for Learning. So the lead researcher will tell you what Universal Design for Learning is.
In many classrooms, the focus is on an illusory average student. Many curricula are designed for that student. Cognitive neuroscience has shown us that there really isn't an average student anywhere, and that's why it's an illusory student. Universal design for learning, though, is particularly focused on making sure that we get those students who have been marginalized, for whom that designing for the average student has never worked well. And that certainly means students who have been struggling, students for whom English is not their first language, students with disabilities. They've been typically marginalized by this illusory average curriculum. Secondly, though, students at the other margins, the students who are called gifted and talented, are also students who've been underserved by this mainstream curriculum. They haven't been challenged. They're bored. They're underserved as well. UDL is a framework based in cognitive neurosciences for designing learning experiences that work across a wide spectrum of learners. Its main purpose is to make sure that everybody is a successful learner and reaches what we call being an expert learner. That is, they know a lot, they know how to do a lot, and they love learning and want to do it more. The key to universal design for learning is that we're designing learning experiences which from the beginning are designed to be universal and to make sure everybody learns. And that design is primarily based on the power to be very flexible in allowing choices, in allowing different paths, in allowing for things to be presented in different ways so that we reach those other two things, universal and everybody learns. The three principles of universal design for learning come from careful analysis of what learning really is, and particularly the research that has been done by thousands of other researchers in cognitive science, cognitive neuroscience, neuropsychology, which have carefully looked at what comprises learning, how does learning really work, and what are its differences among learners. From that work, we've abstracted out three simple principles that are involved in any learning situation. How does the learner pick up information? How do they express and act on that information? And how are they engaged by the learning situation? There are three broad principles. The first has to do with how we present information to the learner. And we talk about multiple means of representation. As it turns out, there's no one way that we can present information so to be successful for everyone to learn it. So we talk about multiple means of representation. So in UDL, we talk about providing multiple representations so that we're sure everyone will be able to make sense of the symbols, the language, the drawings, and so on. Take, for example, in teaching mathematics, it's typically very strong to use multiple representations, not just the symbolic expression of the numbers, but manipulables, things that the children can operate on and see directly and perceptually rather than their symbolic form. So that's a great example of providing multiple representation, both the symbolic number and a physical manipulative. The second principle is provide multiple means of action and expression. And that takes into account the fact that students vary greatly in how they express what they know, how they can act skillfully, how they can communicate in language or in drawing and so on. And students differ widely, so we say we must provide multiple means of expression over the course of our teaching and learning. The third principle is multiple means of engagement. And in many ways, it's the most important principle. If we don't engage students in learning, don't make it important to them, make them motivated for it, then none of the other forms of representation and expression will be that important. Within universal design for learning, when we look at a curriculum, we think of four main components, and each of them need to be universally designed. The first component is, what are its goals? How do we translate standards into things that are important to do in the classroom? Secondly, What are the materials that are going to be in that classroom? Everything from a chalkboard to a textbook to a workbook to something on the wall. Are these materials key to learning? And if so, are they universally designed for learning? Third, the methods. How does the teacher go about teaching when she or he is working at helping students learn? Does she set up collaborative groups? Does she lecture? Does she provide experiences out in the world? And lastly, and very important to universal design for learning, is the means of assessment. How are we sure that learning really occurs? When we began our work, we, like most people, were focused on learners who were doing poorly, who looked like they had disabilities. Over time, we began to change our focus because we could see when we were in classrooms that the classrooms were in fact disabling, that they were not designed properly to ensure that every child would succeed. And we began more and more to see that the curriculum itself was disabled, and that the work of the Universal Design for Learning guidelines is to reduce the disabilities in the curriculum itself so that more students succeed, more students have optimum challenges, and come out as expert learners in the end.
Okay, so with my short remaining time here, I just want to quickly show you, this is the Universal Design for Learning guidelines, which you can also find them at that cast.org website that I put in the chat. And the three principles that David Rose was talking about, or the three categories of principles, are here. I just want us to highlight really quickly that as we are designing our curriculum for distance learning or hybrid learning, or however you're going to start your new semester, think about, are you designing it for all students? Are you thinking about where's the engagement piece? How are students representing? And how are students expressing their learning? Thinking about all three of these things in conjunction with each other, and making sure that we're designing that curriculum so that all students can access it. Craig, I'll get to you in 1 second. I just want to show everybody my contact information, or actually, sorry, we're gonna skip this last thing because I want to have your time honored here. So here is my email and phone number. But that's my phone number for my office desk, since we're all at home kind of at the moment. If you want to get in touch with me, email is the best way to do that.
So thank you, Jennifer, for your presentation and for being with us today. We have a break now for 15 minutes, but as Jennifer mentioned, she'll stay on the this session. So if you have questions, you want to continue here, you can. Otherwise, I just wanted to suggest that you refresh the page on your browser, and you'll be able to access the people feature so that you can direct message with each other if you would like, and to share contact information between attendees. Also take time to take a stretch, a bio break, whatever you need, review the agenda, head over to the expo hall to see some of the exhibitors. Those are all tabs that are on the left-hand side of your screen. And you'll also meet people who are giving away fun prizes. And then you can also go to the networking area and if you'd like to have a quick random chat with other attendees. So thanks for being here today. Thank you, Jennifer, and we'll see you all soon.